It's Part to Truth with me on Kgathatso JJ Tabane. Tonight we're focusing our attention on state-owned enterprise, in particular the South African Airways deal. You recall, SAA has been under business rescue, took to the skies again last year, but before that, a big controversy around who is going to be the equity partner of South African Airways. You recall a couple of years ago, government making a decision that in order for SAA to navigate commercial storms that it was going through, an equity partner would be necessary. A process was started. And of course, tonight, Kgathatso Tlhakudi is the suspended Director General at the Public Enterprise Department, is joining me to tell me exactly what has gone on there and make us understand what are some of the issues and contentious issues around that particular deal. My brother, thank you for your time and agreeing to talk to us.
Dr. Tabane, thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate this invitation.
No, wonderful. Let's get straight into it. I mean, obviously there was a lot of, I don't know whether to call it excitement, about the fact that finally SAA can get onto the path of recovery by bringing in an equity partner, assumably that would bring skills and resources and experience, you know, that would complement what was there at SAA or was still there at SAA. Just give me a sense of the origins of that deal and that idea, to paint the picture of how we're at the point where there seems to be a question mark over the deal with Takatso.
Thank you. Maybe I should start right at the beginning.
Yeah.
SAA went into business rescue in December, the 5th of December. That evening, the board met to place SAA into business rescue.
Yes.
And obviously, on the 6th of December, the decision was made public, so everyone got to know what was happening. I was the acting DG at that particular time. And of course, having seen how business rescue have been handled in this country, looking at other entities, and of course, our own experience later on with SA Express, I was a bit skeptical, I must say, about the route that we were taking. And I recall on the 5th...
Skeptical over business rescue. Okay.
Business rescue.
Yeah.
And on the 5th, in the afternoon, in the morning actually, I came into SAA. There were 2 directors of SAA who were there and who had been pushing for SAA to be placed into business rescue.
Yeah.
And months leading to that, I had engaged with the stakeholders in SAA, the unions, management. SAA needed about 1.6 billion rands to get to the end of that financial year. And SAA from internal savings had, I think, realized about 900 million rands. So there were about 700 million that's outstanding. And you had the pilots, obviously, that had received an increase, about 5.7% was the increase. And obviously, as you know, about I think 65% of SA salaries was going to pilots, and pilots obviously contributed about 13%. Met with them, say we need to roll back that increase so that we can help SA to get to that. And I really believe it was an effort that could have been possibly positively done. The decision was made. Obviously, I went with the decision, but the reality is that the 1.6 billion, of course, there was going to be recapitalization in 2021, ended up being 5 billion rands of 5.5 billion of post-commencement finance, 10.5 billion rands to restructure the business out of business rescue, and obviously about 18 billion rands that the state had to put in to pay off guaranteed debts. So it became a 32 billion rands problem that was created in that particular process. And then we have we bring in obviously the decision that had been made by government, communicated very clearly through the minister from cabinet, was that there's not going to be more funding for SAA beyond the restructuring. And as you know, during business rescue, it took a while to get the 10.5 billion rands. It was get a new entity in. We started that process. With Rand Merchant Bank. We brought them in. We ran a process. From their process, they came up with 2 entities. One of them was it's an international airline group which has a local subsidiary. There's also, the second one was a consortium of an airline management company and a funding institution. As a department ourselves, we're also busy with, we had engaged 2 African airlines, as well as an international airline, which was partnering with a funding group.
What were the 2 international airlines?
It was a consulting arm of Lufthansa. And we put those in a pool. Because remember, the end of 2020, in preparation of SAA coming out of business rescue, we had put a board in place, headed by Mr. Geoffrey Qhena. So now we needed to ensure that that process, now that the board is in place, goes to a rightful authority in handling it, and that would be the board. So myself and my team, we prepared a presentation. The minister was in the beginning of 2021, January, and we said here are the 5 entities. And Takatso was not one of them. Takatso was not in that list. The constituent entities of Takatso, Global and Harith were not in that list. So we hand it over. Once we do that, something strange starts happening. The minister and Gideon Novick start calling me to say, in fact, Gideon, when he spoke to me, talking about
Gideon was not involved in any of the 5 entities.
Was not involved in any of. Gideon was talking to him about an interim management. He says, no, we want to do interim management of this airline. I said, Gideon, how do I explain you coming in when you have ran a process? You know, and we had the report that RMB had given us was, by the way, their last report. Before they decided, no, they are going to leave. And one of the things they decided to me, the chief risk officer at RMB came to see me. With some of the senior people, they said, look, this is taking too long, Kgathatso, we need to move on. So that was what we have, and the report is there, and the department, if they want to be transparent, they can put it into the public arena. In actual fact, I think Carol Payton wrote an article about it in News 24, where he even named the entities that we involved. So I started getting these calls and say, what's going on here? We have run the process with the board. Why are you calling? The minister himself starts calling me. And I recall I was taking some of those calls when I was at home, even over the weekends. So I'm saying, how do these guys emerge?
But tell me, at that point of you receiving these calls, was the process of the 5 already concluded that you are not getting any one of them to be the equity partner?
No. What the board was going, because what the board asked us was, okay, you're giving us these 5 entities. Are we free to go and look for others that we can add? And the answer was yes. I mean, you are the board. Obviously, you must run your process, and then you come back.
Almost like head hunting.
Exactly.
If they were not happy with the 5.
If they were not happy with the 5. But of course, there was this parallel process that was what was happening, that was being engineered by the minister, which now produces Takatso. You know, in fact, Gideon Novick.
To explain how Takatso came into the picture. Just make it simple.
Well, like I say, Gideon starts talking to me. He wants an interim management contract to run SAA.
Why was Gideon to? Can you explain the Gideon's?
Well, Gideon is saying to me, he's been referred to me. If I recall the conversation, he mentioned the minister. He mentioned one of the pro bono advisors that we had in the department, Srinivasan Venkat Krishnan. I think he's normally known as Venkat. He's a former CEO of Anglo Gold Ashanti. He mentions those people to say, look, I'm being told I must speak to you. I said, why are you speaking to me? I mean, I even have text messages where I was explaining that the process is now elsewhere, and how do you explain you coming on board now? In any case, of the offers that we had received also, in fact, one of the entities that was shortlisted said we can do interim management as well, because there was an airline management group that was partnered with a fund, and they said we can do that. We can run the airline, see how things go, and at the right time bring in funding into the airline. So now, how would I explain to them that we have not considered your offer, but we have decided to go with this entity that was not in the process?
So what happened next?
Now, what happens next? The process runs. I mean, the next thing, I'm being called into a meeting. There's Gidon, obviously representing Global. There is Tshepo Mahloele representing Harith. The minister is there. These are the people that we are going to be working with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, this is an announcement from a minister.
No, yeah. This is I'm
You are being told these are the people you are going to work with.
And of course, what the minister had in the conversation that was pushing forward the credentials of Gidon. Obviously, Gidon's family is to run, Comair. He has airline pedigree to him. I said, I don't doubt that. The fact of the matter is that how do you explain him coming in? So the process goes on. I think one of the first documents that was put together, and this was in late 2021, was the MOU. Now, one of the things that was also a concern as well with regard to, especially Global, was that we have former senior pilots, white senior pilots, that had moved from SAA into Global. Now, I'm having the senior black pilots that are left behind in SAA speaking to me and say, Kgathatso, we are receiving these messages. There are these bulletins. There is airline pilots bulletin. Well, literally, we are being threatened. We have been told SAA is coming. These people are going to deal with us. I said, well, this is counter to the transformation drive that we've been pushing at SOEs.
Yeah.
And I'm the beneficiary of that, by the way. I'm an engineer by training. I trained at Dinel. When I did what I was doing, there's very few of our people that were development engineers at the time. So I'm saying, whoa. And I, obviously to try to put a lipstick on a pig, and that's how I'll describe it. I said, I put in additional clauses in the MOU to try and make this thing at least achieve the national objectives in terms of transformation and inclusion.
All right, just pause there, because I want you to zone into how the Takatso introduction to this thing had to do with the five shortlisted, if you like, right, consortia or organizations that wanted to run the airline. I want to deal with that after the break. You must zone in on that. Was the five already discarded when Takatso came, and did Takatso came under the auspices of the board in any way in terms of shortlisting or not? We'll talk about that after the break. The suspended DG at Public Enterprise is my guest tonight, and we're trying to get to the bottom of the Takatso deal that is meant to rescue the South African Airways. Stay tuned. It's Part of Truth. We're carrying on with that conversation, focusing on the Takatso deal. Just clarify, right, the five shortlisted vis-a-vis the minister introducing Takatso to you. Can you just clarify there what was going on? Had you already discarded the five, so it was clear that those will not be considered, and now you have to consider this new entity?
That was one of the areas of great, I'll say, confusion, as well as frustration with the board, because the board had understood that this process, they were handling it. The next thing, there's this Takatso that is emerging from the department through the minister. And of course, the board at the time, I think it would be interesting to hear from them. But I know that some of the private calls that I had with some of the board members, they wanted to understand what was happening. Yeah. And of course, what could I say?
What was your explanation? Because you are the accounting officer.
I'm the accounting officer, correct. All I could say was, look, I don't know how this process has now led to what we have now. And by the way, around the same time, my role actually was reduced. Because remember, the shoulder is the minister. I provide analytical support to the minister. And as the accounting officer, as you correctly have said, if there are going to be resources that move, I have to sign off on them. That's where my role is. Yeah. So I'm explaining to them that, colleagues, I cannot explain this process because I don't know about it, truthfully so. What I know is the conversations that I had with the minister and with Gida Novik. And obviously, I had a discussion subsequent to that also with Mr. Mahloele at Harith, obviously wanting to understand what was happening here. And it became
You did not object to the introduction of Takatso by the minister into the mix. You are only raising the issues that were transactional in terms of you know, a structure of the deal, etc., etc. Am I right?
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that?
That was later on.
Yeah.
Of course, with the minister, I had, because as you can recall, minister for about 2 years was working from home with pandemic, of course. So our conversation tended to happen over the phone mostly. And I had raised the concerns, not with Takatso per se, but
Yeah.
saying, how do you explain these people emerging?
Yeah.
That was my
Yeah,
issue.
what was your concern?
Exactly.
And what concern did you raise? Just be specific with me.
The concern that I was raising was that we have a process that overseen by RMB.
Yeah.
That had presented 5 entities,
Mm-hmm.
which we had given to the board. Now, what is this process?
Yeah.
That was my issues.
So this was introducing a 6th player,
a 6th player.
or was it introducing a player to replace all the 5 in terms of board consideration?
No, it was introducing a player to replace the 5.
Yeah.
Literally, the process that the board thought was running
Yeah.
was no longer.
But as accounting officer, did you object to that? This is where my issue is. My issue is, it looks like you are very involved with the discussion about Takatso, its merits, demerits, etc.
Yeah.
Which means that it was on the table.
Well, internal, of course, I started raising the issues that formally the issues that you referred to earlier. I mean, the announcement of Takatso came up, I think, around June of 2021, and really, you know, I would say to you, it was a conundrum for me. As to what does one do now that we have, and of course the Treasury also was raising its own issues as well on this thing. And one, you first try to do a bit of damage control, if I put it that way. Do damage control, ensure you have an MOU that does not compromise our transformation objectives. You try to to ensure that at least we're getting good value out of this process. But already it was not sitting well, I must say. And I raised this internally. Now, for me...
But did you raise it with the minister in a way of saying this is irregular, right, to bring in this 6th element? Or were you simply saying that it doesn't match the other 5, right? In other words, you didn't question that the minister was actually introducing a new player at any point in the whole discussion?
That was really the issue that I was raising. To say what process supports the introduction of I mean, because of course, what
was his answer?
Well, he spoke about the credentials. He went on about the credentials. Harith has the funding. Gideon and Global are bringing airline management experience, which Harith does not have. Yeah. That was his response. But now, what do we do with these other entities that are on the other side? Yeah. I'm sure from my responses to you, I never really got clear answers. Yeah. But I started to become, when the issues of the transaction, because I was no longer part of the negotiating team, by the way. We're going into 2022 last year. Now, the next document that must be signed is the share sale and purchase agreement. It comes to me. In fact, the first draft that I saw was in late 2021. Yeah. I look at this document and I say, how are we going to explain this when we get to the South African public? In fact, we had one of the African airlines in the country. I was having dinner with them, one of the colleagues that was busy with this team. Yeah. Brings me this thing to say, hey, the SPA is ready. So I scroll on it on my device, sitting there. I say, I can't sign this. Yeah. I refer it back. You
refer it back to who?
To the team. There was one of the advisors in the minister's office, as well as one of the junior managers in the department who are running with this thing, with minister. Now, it must come to me because the minister delegated the power to sign the share sale and purchase agreement to me as the DG. So I say I can't sign it. We come into 2022. This document is there. It is still as I saw it in the previous year. I raised the issue of valuation. How do you explain that we are selling this business for 51 rand? Yeah. And now we have this mechanism where the airline will be, or the government will be paid 3 billion rands for its assets. which figure I really was not comfortable with.
Yeah.
So I say to them, how do you explain that you now have this pref share scheme? These entities have never paid dividends.
Yeah.
Now, what guarantee do we have that this entity will ever declare dividend to service the preferential share scheme? That's what
just simplify that for me. So you were questioning the valuation. In other words, you're questioning the actual value of the transaction.
The actual value.
In simple terms, was Takatso going to put any money into the airline to make it survive?
Well, it was not evident. Because there were 2-3 billion rands, and people get confused about it. The assets of SAA had been put at 3 billion rands to be paid through the pref share scheme. This scheme, I was saying, why don't they put the 3 billion rands down to pay for the assets? That's what I was saying. But people, when we are being railroaded, in fact, one of the meetings, the minister came on after being briefed by the team. And I felt like his intention was to intimidate me. I said, it's not going to work. I'm not going to sign something that looks like this. I even wrote an email just to make sure that the system understands where my position is. In that email, if the department wants to be transparent with South Africans, they can release it. And I raised that. I said, you're not going to get the 3 billion rands because this business still requires
from Takatso.
Now from Takatso, obviously now jointly running the business with SAA.
Yeah, but in simple terms, for the viewers to understand, Takatso was in your view was supposed to pay the 3 billion
for the assets, yes,
for the assets in order to be involved, in order for them to have
take over the business,
51%, to have 51% of the business, and then they were saying no.
Well, they are saying no. They say no. We like the pref share scheme. And number two, and then there was this thing that no, we probably will make more money through this, and say it's not going to happen because the valuations. Because I was questioning them because SAA used to be a 30 billion rands turnover business. And you and I know the assets at SAA. We had one of the local property developers coming in and say, the head office, Airways Park, we can develop that into a conference facility and a hotel and etc. etc. That is worth 4 billion rands. So now, how do you now explain that against the 3 billion rands? There was a second 3 billion rands.
Yes, tell me about the second 3 billion.
The second 3 billion rands was to say, well, since government no longer has the pockets to capitalize the business, we are going to put 3 billion rands as working capital into SAA. So my question was, what is it coming in as? Is it coming in as equity, which means, unencumbered cash coming into the business, or is it coming in with you raising the capital against SAA balance sheet? Now that would not make sense, because it's like someone coming in and saying, I'm buying your house.
Just summarize in terms of the actual now agreement you are meant to be signing at the instruction of the minister, right? How would it look like? How would the transaction look like? Would it simply look like 3 billion that is in the future in terms of if they make money, then they can pay the 3 billion, but they won't put the 3 billion now?
Correct.
Right? And then the other 3 billion of working capital, where they're going to bring that as Takatso.
That was supposed to come in quite early on, obviously at the conclusion.
No, but according to the agreement, where they're now going to inject that cash in order to be used as working capital.
That was one of my challenges, because that was not clear. Because remember the process that we ran with RMB. We had gotten Seabury Consulting, which is one of the leading aviation consulting business in the world, owned by Accenture. And they did a business model for us. And they said SAA requires 5.4 billion rands of capital for it to be restarted. And that was the basis on which we engaged everyone else on, the 5.4 billion rands. Now you have 3 billion. That is obviously at the announcement, I think it was in June 2021 when Takatso deal was announced. They said we're going to put in 3 billion rands as working capital into this business. So now the issue is, are you putting in cash? Or are you taking the balance sheet of SA to go to the
So where
banks?
did you leave that process? I mean, where is it standing at the moment?
Well, the process, remember, I got suspended on the 3rd of May. Or basically, I was told to leave the office 3rd of May. And I was suspended about a month later.
Yeah. Just park there. Let's talk about that suspension after the break. You know, you've claimed in a letter to Parliament or corresponding to Parliament that your suspension was linked to this, your disagreement over this deal.
Correct.
The minister has written a letter. I'm not sure they have seen that letter to Parliament to say this is not the case.
Yeah.
You're suspended for a completely different reason. We'll talk about that after the break. After the break, we get deeper into the issue. What should happen next in terms of this particular deal? Is there a deal that is above board? Is it a deal that has a big question mark over it? It's Part to Truth. Public Enterprise on the spotlight tonight with the suspended Director General of the department over there. And of course, Takatso deal being the central. We'll also talk a little more later about other state-owned enterprises. They seem to be in a total mess. We have always heard of stories at Dinel, you know, people not being paid their full salaries. You know, there's always a big question mark over Transnet. What's happening over there? The suspended DG will talk to me a little bit about that later. But let's just deal with this suspension issue. Why were you suspended?
Can I just a 1 minute on the previous issue that we're discussing? What the Takatso transaction needs, it needs an independent and objective institution to investigate what has happened. Yeah. And that's what I've called for. Yeah. That's why.
But is it up in the air? I mean, at this point, I mean, we've been talking at this for what, 4 years now since the first announcement that we need an equity partner. Are you saying that it is not at the conclusive stage as we my understanding is that by June there was an announcement that Takatso is the one, and at this point you're working out the details. Not that is a big question mark of whether or not in the first place they must be in the table.
Well, from what I understand, from obviously as you understand, I'm out the system. I'm not in the department anymore. What I'm understanding is that the minister is intent on following through on this transaction. There's one of the hurdles is to get the Competition Commission eventually go to the tribunal to authorize the deal. And once that is done, then the minister will sign off on it, and then Takatso will take over SAA. My call is that that should not be allowed to go ahead until this deal, the deal has been cleared and allegations that have leveled to say we actually have corruption that has gone on here. You are
what are your allegations on corruption exactly? Can you just be crisp about it? Are you accusing the minister of interfering in the process? Are you accusing, who are you accusing of it not being legal?
The minister has interfered in the process. That one is quite clear. You have an asset of the state which is owned by all of us, which is being sold for 51 rand.
51 rand.
For 51 rands. Whose assets were undervalued by at least 7 billion rands. And my estimate is that the assets are probably worth about 15 billion rands. So when you compare them to the 3 billion rands, which you are unlikely to get, versus the 15 billion rands, you can see that there's something that is not adding up here. The new chairperson of SAA has said we need to look at these valuations. Because the board, in anticipation, obviously they have to prepare for the annual reports now. That they found actually that the real estate of SAA is worth over 6 billion rands compared to the 1.2 billion rands that was in a valuation that was done by Takatso, not the department, not an independent authority. So I'm saying those are red flags. The SIU has a responsibility to ensure that its proclamation is extended to include this transaction. The NPA and an Office of Serious Commercial Crimes want to look into this particular transaction, so that all of us, when the transaction eventually, we can be at peace that this was done properly. But I know, I was the DG of the department. I was in the inside. I'm telling you, there's something that's not smelling well here. And
all right. Can you tell me the link between your suspension and this deal? Because the minister is denying that these things are linked. He's saying you're suspended for interference in a process of HR and so on. Just clarify that for us.
You know, and that's what I've been saying. It does not make sense. JJ, you'll have a DG who's responsible for such a big department. A DG, by the way, has been very successful in running the department. I mean, the last year I was there, we achieved 91% of of our predetermined objectives. They will struggle to get to 50% in this year. I can tell you that now. They will even, I got unqualified audit outcomes in time that I was there. I think for one of the years, I got even a clean audit. So there was no matters of emphasis that were raised. Now, you come and suspend a DG saying that he interfered in able to appoint the junior manager, which appointment did not even happen. Because I stopped the appointment. Because I had asked a panel that was named to interview this additional candidate that we had looked at for another position. They had come back and made a recommendation. I said no. So I said, let's stop this particular project. Because I wanted to relook the role. Because, in fact, I was saying, why can't I combine this role with that of the office manager and the DG's office? Because it's a contract management role. The facilities management is outsourced. We are in a building.
But did the minister seek clarity from you in terms of why you stopped the process?
He never did. He never did. In fact, the minister, a couple of weeks before then, comes with a moratorium on all appointments. I say to the minister, you can't do that. Because remember, in terms of Public Service Act, the minister is responsible for HR functions. They get delegated. He delegates what he can to me. So he's well within his powers to put in the moratorium.
So why are you saying he can't ask for a moratorium?
Because I'm running on empty here. I have 7 DDG positions. Only one has a full-time appointee in it.
Sure.
I have at senior management, director upwards, I think at the time close to 40% a vacancy rate. I'm supposed to do oversight over ESCOM, but I don't have an electrical engineer. I'm supposed to do oversight over Transnet. I don't have a logistics or any engineer for them. It's mostly economists that are in that particular space. I don't have a DDGs for both functions. I don't have a DDG for a Dinel.
And you were recruiting for all these posts?
Exactly.
So when he was talking about moratorium, was it in the process of these posts being filled? In other words, it was not simply something that was on your organogram saying vacant, but you had advertised, you were interviewing.
We had advertised, we were interviewing. And the most critical areas where the skills are, which is at senior manager level. And it says, no, you can appoint from deputy director downwards. Director upwards, you can't appoint. So what is the point?
Reason?
So I read that and I say to the minister, how do you expect me to meet my objectives if you are not giving me resources? So that's what had happened here. So instead of, in fact, even when I was suspended, JJ, the minister calls me in on the 3rd of May. Kgathatso, take a few days off. We are going to we are going to deal with this statement. It will disappear. I'm going to get a law firm in. Because I tell him straight to him as a minister, there's nothing here. This is not an issue. This is not an issue that you can place me on special leave or put me on suspension, which powers the minister didn't have, by the way. But I realized as I was sitting at home, no, there's something cooking here. Obviously, your mind start to run and say, what are the issues? What's going on here? And what do I come to?
Can you create for me the nexus between your suspension and the Takatso deal? Did they then sign once you're on suspension?
Well, they actually signed when, my health going into late 2021 had not been, I got second COVID. So I had to go in for a procedure for a day in February, and it was the 14th of February. They signed in a hastily arranged meeting at SAA, where the minister comes in with the Takatso people, and the SAA colleagues says, what's going on? We are signing. Now it begs the question.
They were signing what? The MOU that you're talking about?
No, the MOU had already been signed the year before.
So what are they signing?
They're signing the share sale and purchase agreement.
On the basis of those numbers you're talking about?
And the basis of the numbers that were flawed. And guess what? That share sale and purchase agreement is saying in March, DPE must put 900 million rands into an escrow account controlled by Takatso. So I say,
but did that happen?
Because we didn't have the money. It could not happen. Because the PFMA is very clear. You don't commit the state without being sure of the funds, where they're going to come from. So what do I do when I come back from that procedure? I call the two DDGs. Say, explain this. You have a responsibility to advise minister properly. And what you have done here is in violation of the PFMA, because the PFMA does not only speak to accounting officers, speak to acting accounting officers, and it speaks to other officials.
So in summary, you're saying that you are suspended in order for you to be out of the way so that the Takatso sale agreement can be signed despite your objections.
Exactly.
Now, would that be right, though, to say throughout that process you had been part of, in a sense, shaping that transaction? It was only the point of signing where you said, no, I can't sign this because of whatever questions you had. Can you just clarify that part?
No, I was not. And the department has come out and said, no, the DG was involved with this transaction.
Yes, they said that,
But that is fiction. That is lies. The colleagues know. I ran the process during business rescue. In fact, I was interviewed a few times where I was pushing this process to come to an end, which eventually did on the 1st of April 2021. And when my process ended, because parallel to that business rescue, we had the process I've spoken about with RMB. My involvement ended there. And I had the DDG at DPE speak of a technical committee that evaluated 4 other entities from which Takatso emerged. That is lies. That's what I'll put it.
So Takatso did not participate in a competitive process.
There was no process, and that for me was
Takatso was handpicked.
Was handpicked.
Okay. After the break, we will round off the conversation. I want to talk a little bit about other SOEs, because this seems like, if you like, a trend. The way the SOEs seem not to be managed properly, etc. This is under your watch. So I want you to tell me, how do you explain Dinel? How do you explain this thing where people are not paid salaries at Dinel? How do you explain Transnet? And the problems that are happening there? With the suspended DG at public enterprises, lots of complaints about SOEs. In fact, there was a report, and so you must start with me. There was a report that was produced by Mary Apega, looking at 700 SOEs. Correct, I know that they are not all under your purview, but this report happened under your two previous ministers. And people could say it's gathering dust. What do you say about that? Because that report tells you where the problems are, what needs to be done, recommendations of way forward. Have you read that report?
Yes, I have. In fact, when it was released, I was the DDG in the department.
So what happened to it?
Well, it has gathered dust. If you go look at our APPs over the last few years, we have been saying we'll come up with an SOE bill. Which obviously will be an enabling mechanism for us to manage these entities better. We have said the Companies Act has its limitations when it comes to these entities. So do the Public Finance Management Act. We said it needs the PFMA is great for government department, not for commercial entities. They have not met that objective. And remember, as a department, I provide support to the minister. So when I put an objective like that into the APP, it must be approved by the minister. But we have not met that objective. Remember, there's an SOE Council as well that was put in place by the president, chaired by the president, which has some of our leading business people in it. That body was supposed to, amongst other things, produce this SOE bill. And what we know, we have not had much from it. I've been out of the system for a year. I don't know what is happening in the background with regard to that.
But when you were there, let's just focus on Dinel with the limited time that is there. Right? In a number of months, Dinel paid 86% of salaries. I mean, this is a bizarre thing. I haven't seen it happen even in one of the worst companies. They either don't pay you at all or they pay you a full salary. Well,
I had to go to Zondo on Dinel. I worked very closely with the executive team at Dinel when I arrived at the department in 2012. To get Dinel out of a difficult position it was in back then, where it was dependent on the state, basically to to prop up its balance sheet. We got to a point where the turnover of Denel increased from about 4 billion rands to about 8 billion rands by 2015-16 financial year. The business became operationally profitable. In fact, eventually, even the bottom line, the net profit line, was positive. But we know what happened. We had, unfortunately, I'll say, we had a wrong board being appointed, and I spoke to this very extensively at Zondo. And what happens when you have a business like Denel, which is dependent on the banks for its working capital? When you do wrong governance moves, those facilities disappear, and that's exactly what happened. Facilities was recalled. There was a Denel vehicle system transaction where Denel was exposed to about 850 million rands because it was funded through the banks. That was pulled. Now, when you have to provide cash out of the business to settle those facilities, you leave the business without capital, and the problems literally multiplied from then onwards. And unfortunately, and at various stages...
But who was supposed to take responsibility? Are you saying that nobody took responsibility for this mess at Denel?
Well, that board that was in place, the board of Daniel Mancha, should have taken responsibility at the time. Of course, the Minister Brown, at the time, who had appointed that board, should also take responsibility for what we had.
But
and by the way, I had opposed that board.
But that didn't happen.
That didn't happen.
You opposed the board? What do you mean?
No. Remember, as a DDG, where does the cabinet member come from? It comes from within the. So
you opposed the appointment of the board?
I said we can do better. To put the right.
But you ignored.
Of course, we had ignored, and that was properly ventilated at Zondo. And that's all I can do as a DG. I can advise my political principals in terms of what's the right thing to do. It's up to them, ultimately, because the entities don't report to the department; they report to the minister. So that's and that's one of the things that the political system in this country needs to understand.
But it looks like the entire portfolio was a big mess. I mean, SA Express liquidated. I'm not sure whether that's directly under your nose.
Yes, it was,
Mango. Also, the plug was pulled.
Exactly.
Can you address those two quickly for me? Start with Mango. There's been a big hoo-ha about the fact that you interfered in the appointment of the board and the CEO at Mango. Can you clarify that?
No, I think the board
as a department, because when they say Minister Pravin intervened and so on, you are the advisor, your immediate advisor. Are you washing your hands of that particular one of Mango that collapsed the place?
We had a good board at SA Express. Let me say that. Which obviously appointed its own executives. The challenge there was that the business was not properly capitalized. Even when we provided funding. I think there's about 2.5 billion rands of funding that we provided to the business. The business was not, the money was not to prop up, it was to pay for the liabilities which are guaranteed by the state. So which means basically the business is just the conduit to get the money to the funders. So we didn't really properly capitalize. And it was the same story applied to Denel. Even we wanted additional capital to be put into Denel in order to get it to float. Coming to Mango, obviously a portion of the board of SAA was sitting on that board, so they were not really a direct appointment of the minister. But I agree with you. The appointment of the CEO, what was the chap's name again? Who had gone to FastJet and come back. There were lots of red flags around that. Unfortunately, that was something that...
it didn't have qualifications.
Exactly. So, because it's a subsidiary of SAA, the consultations with the board of SAA...
What was the role of you and the minister there in his appointment?
That's what the minister had to basically concur with the board of SAA. But the board of SAA and Mango were the ones that would do the appointment with regard to that appointment.
He didn't interfere?
Well, I think that matter was taken to the public protector, and the public protector found the minister to be in the clear. I think maybe you can go and look at that report. But what I'll say is that it really didn't make sense. You had a preferred candidate who was well known in the airline industry that could have gone into the position. You had the right. Then the spec for the job is lowered to enable...
By who?
to enable Nikope and hold
no, but it was lowered by the board.
It would have been the board of SAA, because the first process was run by the board of Mango itself. And so when you do that, immediately say, why would you lower the spec? Was the last spec not appropriate? Should it not be, if you are running the process?
Is there any hope for this SOEs? What, as we conclude, what is your own assessment? The Takatso thing sounds like a big mess. SA Express, I think it's out of business now. Mengu is out of business. And now the airline industry is a total mess with, price gouging and what have you. What's your own overall assessment about what the problem is in terms of managing these SOEs properly?
It's about getting the best people we can find and leaving them to do the job. We have to find a way of minimizing the role of politicians in the appointment of boards. That's what I will say to you. We have a process which is very transparent in the appointment of judges, where if you have an issue, someone who's nominated, you can raise it and say, this man is a scallum. He's just done something there. Then that gets factored in when he gets interviewed.
Yes.
Why can't we have the same process for the board?
But what stopped you from doing that? I mean, is there anybody objecting for you to do that as an accounting officer?
No, the accounting officer is not as powerful as you're making it out. This is within the politicians' realm, and of course there's a presidential SOE Council, which must be advising on issues like this as well. So my advice is, can we have a look at that? SOEs
but it's not like you have placed that particular approach on the table, have you?
Well, I put it at Zondo, by the way. It's not the first time that I'm talking about
You put it at Zondo?
Yeah, I put it at Zondo. And I think probably internal, I'm trying to remember that, but I don't think I did formally. But it's one of the vehicles that I think could do. But can I just say the following?
As we close,
our SOEs are important to the development of this country. We have an imbalanced economy. The only space where people that look like you and I are still able to assert themselves and do proper jobs is in the SOEs. We know what's happening in the private sector. So we should not allow ourselves to be misled by this argument to say SOEs are in a mess, therefore they must go. Because
they must be fixed.
They must be fixed. You will not see a private company running a line, electricity line to a rural village somewhere so that people can get electricity, because it's not profitable. But an SOE can do that because government can impose those kind of deliverables on them. Thank you so much.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. We'll obviously get the department to respond to some of your allegations that you have made here tonight. But thank you for your time and sharing of your own perspectives around these matters. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Do you believe him? I mean, that is the suspended DG putting on the table that there is a smelly corruption that is happening around the Takatso deal. He's quite clear about it, and he believes that that deal has to be reversed. You may have your own views about it. You can tweet us at ENCA, at JJ Tabane. Of course, as I indicated earlier, the Department of Public Enterprise is free to come and respond to these allegations. But until we talk frankly again, may God bless you.